Chapter 275. Ivatar Jahav 1. It went just as Noor had promised. Eugene wasn't investigated for his involvement in the fall of the Dragon Demon Castle or the eradication of Carabloom, nor was there any investigation into the identity of Rhaenyra, someone without any apparent relations to the rest of their group. They were able to check out of the hotel and leave for Pandemonium without any problems whatsoever. They needed to go to Pandemonium to use the international warp gate that was located in the capital city in order to leave Helmuth, because they had first entered Helmuth through its border at the Alcardi parish. This would be Eugene's first time seeing Pandemonium in this life. Eugene compared Pandemonium, which he had last seen 300 years ago, with the current Pandemonium that he was standing in front of now. It really has changed a lot, Eugene observed. Even within this concrete jungle, the 99-storied building stood out. A towering Demon King's castle that seemed like it could even touch the sky. This was Babel. Eugene clicked his tongue as he compared the current Babel with the Babel from his previous life. There had once been a red plain in front of the castle, which had somewhat served as the front courtyard of Babel. The horrors of the black fog that had once shrouded this land finally ended only after the ground had been layered with the corpses of humans, demon folks, and demonic beasts. Now, countless high-rises had been erected here, and at the center of it all stood a memorial park dedicated in remembrance to all those who had died during the war. Where did the Centipede Mountains go? Eugene wondered. 300 years ago, the Centipede Mountains had once surrounded the borders of this fief, but now those disgusting, hideous, and capable of crawling mountains were nowhere to be seen. Had they really cleared away the entire mountain range while they were building the city? Or perhaps they just stuffed them away somewhere, speculated Eugene. The notorious Centipede Mountains from his previous life had been closer to gigantic demonic beasts than to any normal terrain. Those giant centipedes might even still be buried beneath those neatly paved roads. As his thoughts continued in this direction, Eugene let out a bemused snort at his own bewilderment. The changes he had witnessed throughout Helmuth were remarkable, but the changes that had occurred here in Pandemonium were particularly startling. Why had the Demon King's castle transformed into a 99-storied high-rise, and what were those things floating through the sky? Those hundreds of small fish. "They're watching us," Mare reported with a worried expression as she grabbed onto Eugene's collar. These were the air fish, Pandemonium's prided perfect security system that had been introduced in the tourist booklet that they were provided with before they had entered Helmuth. "Look at all those fish up there, Sir Eugene. It's said that they keep an eye over this vast city 24/7, covering every square inch of land. Everything they see is then sent to the control office in Babel, the Demon King's castle," Mare recalled from the brochure. It seems that you're well informed, Mare. As you've just said, those air fish are the perfect security system that Pandemonium is so proud of. If anything illegal is spotted inside of the city, Babel's Bureau of Control will immediately dispatch their security forces. Rhaenyra, whose head was covered by an oversized hood, laughed with a proud lift of her chin. Although her forehead was usually crowned by her winding golden antlers, currently her horns weren't out on display. This was because Eugene had told her to hide them due to the fact that they were far too eye-catching. Naturally, Rhaenyra had protested this order. Because to her, as the daughter of a duke, the Black Dragon, and as a dragon herself, the red jewel and horns on her forehead were part of her identity as a dragon. However, after being told that if she didn't get rid of her horns right away, he would slash her red jewel with his sword, Rhaenyra had agreed to set aside her dignity as a dragon, at least for a little while. However, Mare and Sir Eugene, this lady insists that you be more tactful in your treatment of this lady. Should this lady be subject to unjust violence and harassment, I will be sure to raise a high-pitched cry that everyone in Pandemonium will hear. Rhaenyra's voice gradually sank as she kept talking. This was because Eugene's eyes had widened and he was glaring at Rhaenyra. Although her red jewel hadn't even been struck yet, his savage gaze alone was enough to fill Rhaenyra with fear. Of course I won't scream," Rhaenyra stammered. "There's no way I would do something like that." Squeeze. "Why do you have to keep scaring her?" Christina complained with a glance towards Eugene as she wrapped her hands comfortingly around Rhaenyra's own. At this sight, Rhaenyra felt deeply moved and she looked up at Christina. Although Rhaenyra had never known her mother, she wondered if this was what it would feel like to have a mother. "She's the one spouting nonsense," Eugene protested. "Even if that is the case, it's still not right for you to resort to violence," Christina chided. Children are sensitive and special care needs to be taken when disciplining them. Eugene scoffed. You're calling her a child? Her age should be around 4 times older than yours and mine combined. Since her personality hasn't properly developed and she still thinks in a childish fashion, that means she is a child, Christina insisted. Christina hadn't denied that Rhaenyra had been spouting nonsense just now. She had also admitted in a roundabout way that even for a dragon, Rhaenyra acted in a childish manner that didn't match her age. However, Rhaenyra wasn't able to see through the meaning behind Christina's words. Instead, she gently returned Christina's grip on her hands and pulled them close to her chest with a giggle. I kind of want to call her mother, Rhaenyra muttered to herself. Christina responded distractedly. Huh. Rhaenyra's face reddened as she stammered. I didn't say anything. In fact, this was all due to conscious guidance on Anis's part. Although she didn't think it was possible for the black dragon Rhysakia to have any fatherly love for his daughter. Even so, the Dragon Duchess still had some value as a hostage. Because, setting aside any fatherly affection, Anis was sure that Rhysakia did feel a possessiveness over Rhaenyra, though because of her value as a sacrifice first and as his daughter second. Apart from that, Anis had also decided that she could use Rhaenyra as a counterforce to Mare. It had been a clever move on that chick Sienna's part to leave behind a familiar that closely resembled her childhood self. It should have been because of her obsession and longing for the happy ending that they had talked about during their journey, and Sienna herself couldn't have imagined that her familiar would end up getting close to Eugene, but in any case, hadn't Mare still ended up accompanying Eugene? That cunning and cheeky familiar that so resembled her owner, Mare had managed to establish her character by acting like a child that had been born to both Hamel and Sienna. Even now, Mare was stuck to Eugene's side as if that position naturally belonged to her. So what would happen when Sienna was someday resurrected? How destructive would the actions of 2 people acting like a mother and a daughter be? Christina hesitated. No matter what, sister, pretending to be a mother and daughter with a dragon duchess who has no relation to us is a little. Anis snapped at her. Christina, there's no need to go so far as to pretend to be mother and daughter. You just need to fake playing house enough that we can fight back against Sienna and Mare. You should know by now that Hamel has a soft heart, so there's no way he'll get rid of this dragon duchess with such a tragic backstory. That might be the case, but Christina and Anis had slightly different perspectives when it came to the dragon duchess. While Anis saw her as a valuable hostage and a counterforce to Mare, Christina instead felt only pity for the situation that the dragon duchess was in. Anis continued to persuade her. Isn't that more reason why you should take care of her? In fact, if at all possible, I want you to have a child with Hamel before Sienna returns. Huh? Christina yelped. She was so surprised and embarrassed that she unconsciously spoke out loud. What are you so surprised about? Anis asked. Christina, don't you secretly want that as well? When did I ever say that? Christina protested. One of the cute things about you is that you can still panic and try to lie to me even though we share the same consciousness. Or perhaps, Christina, how about you play Mare's role instead? Anis proposed. PP, please don't say something so ridiculous. Yeah, I thought you would respond like that. Since you don't want to call Hamel your daddy. I guess it wouldn't be too bad if I tried it out myself. Christina, I just thought of a really great idea. What if I pretend to be you and act like a child to Hamel? Then I'll make kissing noises and... Arg. Christina let out a shriek, unable to keep listening to Anis, her face flushed with embarrassment and shame. What unbelievable shoddiness for someone who was once called a saint. There she goes again, Eugene sighed. He had seen this sight so often that it didn't surprise him anymore. Eugene pondered what in hell Anis was saying inside her head to cause Christina to go into such a seizure. But Eugene held back the urge to ask as he didn't feel confident that he was ready to face the truth. If you shout like that, we'll get caught. Mare panicked and clutched at Eugene's arms, but Eugene just clicked his tongue and shook his head. We won't get caught, Eugene reassured her. This was thanks to the black casino coin he had received from Noir. Because it came from such a suspicious source, Eugene had done a lot of research on the coin. There was no magic infused into this coin. Instead, it had been embedded with Noir's immense dark power and fused with her authority. Just holding the coin alone was enough to influence any outside ability to perceive their group. The demon eye of fantasy, Eugene thought silently. While it couldn't cause such a drastic change in perception as when Noir herself opened her demon eye, the coin could still easily fool Helmuth's strict background checks. Even now it was still at work. Pandemonium's airfish were designed to continuously examine the identities of every target that they observed. The fall of the Dragon Demon Castle and the eradication of Carabloom were at this very moment being reported on the news being broadcast from Pandemonium's billboards and holograms. However, even though the Dragon Duchess, the only survivor of the Dragon Demon Castle, was right in front of them, none of the airfish had been drawn to her. In other words, the black coin that Noir had given him was even able to fool the airfish's detection. The power of her demon eye is far too strong, Eugene observed. If I'm going to fight Noir, then I need to prepare some countermeasures for her demon eye. Right now he didn't have any solutions available to him. Just the other day when Noir came looking for them at their hotel, Eugene hadn't been able to resist when the power of her demon eye of fantasy was released right in front of his nose. La la la, 1. Happy Giabella. Everyday Giabella. Welcome to the Giabella Park. Dreams come true. Eugene was struck dumb as he watched the demon folk idols dance on the hologram screens. This group was the Dream Girls, who had just debuted under the Giabella Entertainment Agency. In front of their 5-member girl group who seemed to embody the concept of liveliness, Noir Giabella was promoting her Giabella Park while wearing a costume identical to the idols. That shameless hussy, how could she wear such an outrageous outfit? As a priest, Christina stammered violently as she experienced a sense of acute culture shock. Eugene was also feeling a similar sort of shock. After glaring at the perfect choreography being displayed on the holographic screen, in the end he just turned his head away and left. Let's go. Thanks to the coin, he didn't have to worry about being caught by an inspection, but even so he couldn't afford to let his guard down completely. This was the capital city of Pandemonium. As the place where the Demon King of Incarceration's castle was located, this was also where his loyal henchman, Gavid Lindman, could usually be found. Especially since Gavid was the Grand Duke and the Chief of Security here in Helmuth. If they needlessly lurked around in Pandemonium and got caught by Gavid or his Black Fog, then it could become a pain in the ass. Because no matter how strong Noir Giabella's authority was, it still wouldn't be enough to fool Gavid's eyes. You were planning on returning to the Lionheart estate, right? Christina asked. It won't take too long. I'm just going to stop by shortly to borrow something, Eugene explained. They had headed to the Dragon Demon Castle in such a hurry because they needed to investigate the identity of Raizakia's hatchling. Fortunately, things had worked out well and they had even managed to kidnap the Dragon Duchess. And they had also confirmed that Raizakia was still connected to the land within the rainforest. Although he had considered just heading to the Samar rainforest like this, Eugene decided to make a few more preparations in order to be sure of defeating Raizakia. I'll return by myself, so you should keep an eye on this brat, Christina, Eugene instructed. Christina nodded. Yes, understood. They had already discussed this beforehand. In terms of pure combat power, Christina might still be lacking, but Anise could add her own strength onto Christina's. On top of that, since they had already received a draconic promise from Rhaenyra, it was impossible for her to escape. Well, in the first place, I don't think that this hatchling with such a low mental age will even think of running away, Eugene thought as he headed towards the warp gate. Rhaenyra, who was holding on to the hem of Christina's robe as they walked, pouted her lips. This lady also wants to see what the Lionheart estate is like, Rhaenyra demanded. From what this lady has heard, the Lionhearts are the strongest martial clan on the continent, and their estate is quite magnificent. I have also heard that there are a lot of rarely seen elves living there. You're really well informed, Eugene observed. This lady has perused a lot of information while resting in my villa, Rhaenyra declared proudly. By that she meant that she had usually watched TV all day. Rhaenyra was acting smug while puffing out her chest, but Eugene didn't even bother to expose her. The Lionhearts will hate you, Eugene stated bluntly. There's no place for you there. Rhaenyra protested. What are you talking about? What has this lady done for the Lionhearts to hate me so? Isn't it only natural when you consider who your father is? Eugene pointed out. This lady might be the daughter of the Black Dragon, but I don't think that any dislike of my father should really reflect on me, Rhaenyra said in a tearful voice. However, no matter how pitifully she begged, Eugene had no intention of taking Rhaenyra home with him for the moment. The reason for this was simple. It was because Eugene was trying to be tactful. Although it had never been his intention to do so, whenever Eugene left the main house and traveled somewhere, he had always ended up bringing guests with him on his return. There was Layman from Nahama, over 100 elves from Samar, and Christina from the Holy Empire. What if he brought the Dragon Duchess home with him this time? And Scylla's fan might just end up flying out of her hands in anger. Though maybe she'll actually be pleased, Eugene considered hopefully. Now that she was the main lady of the Lionheart house, and Scylla had lost much of her poisonous thorns. This meant that her personality had become much more flexible. Judging by her attitude towards Mare, she seemed to be particularly fond of children. As such, she might find Rhaenyra quite cute as well. But for Eugene, that would just make things even more stressful. Although Eugene didn't go so far as to think of Rhaenyra as a hostage, that didn't mean he was going to treat her with any sort of affection. He still hadn't come up with an answer of what to do with her once they killed Rhysakia, but according to common sense, there was no way that she would feel comfortable with her father's killers. Mare, how dare you act so unpleasantly towards this lady? If you keep that up, this lady shall be forced to discipline you by informing the Black Dragon, Rhaenyra threatened. Mare scoffed. What are you talking about? Sir Eugene is going to kill your father. There is no way that Duke Black Dragon will be slain by humans. If you choose to submit to this lady now, even if that human dies, this lady can spare your life by taking you in as my personal maidservant, Rhaenyra generously offered. The back-and-forth conversation between the two was causing Eugene to clench his fist in irritation. Eugene's purpose for dropping by the Lionheart estate was to borrow Geddon's shield, which was currently in Sion's possession. When he left for Helmuth, Sion had yet to return from Roer, so he hadn't been able to borrow the shield back then. Geddon's shield was able to redirect all the attacks that it blocked into empty space. This meant that as long as the wielder's mana held up, it could block any attack. While its ability was absurdly powerful, the mana consumption was just as significant. Anytime the shield was used in defense, the stronger the attack that it blocked, the exponentially greater the amount of mana that was required. So much so that even someone like Vermouth wasn't able to use Geddon's shield repeatedly. Though his opponents were the Demon Kings, Eugene admitted. Rhysakia, who was trapped within a dimensional rift, couldn't be in his normal condition. However, Eugene still didn't think it was definite that Rhysakia would be any weaker than he was in his prime. As such, he needed to prepare as thoroughly as he could. If he used Geddon's shield, he would be able to block Rhysakia's breath attack a few times. The dimensional rift won't be an advantageous battlefield for me either. In a place like that, there was no mana or primal spirits. It would be an environment similar to the other side of the Lahanjar, where Eugene had his fight with Molan. That means I won't be able to use prominence to its full potential. It would be impossible for Eugene to use it in replacement for ignition like he had in the Dragon Demon Castle. Any spatial leap using the feathers might also be impossible. Even if the feathers could still be used as a replacement for the spatial coordinates, it was unlikely that a spatial leap would work properly within a dimensional rift. What if he made a mistake and accidentally jumped from one rift to another? If that happens, even if it is you, Sir Eugene, you'll be sure to perish if you can't get any help. Or perhaps you'll get stuck in a rift somewhere just like Rhysakia. Mare chipped in. Humph, Eugene snorted mentally. It was too early to make any precise assessments, but there was a high possibility of just such a danger. Eugene assessed the situation gravely. If prominence is sealed, the battle will be extremely difficult. No matter how much mana I might have, it's impossible for me to match a dragon in terms of firepower. That dragon has been trapped there for hundreds of years, Mare pointed out. But Rhysakia is an ancient dragon, Eugene argued back. His dragon heart should be able to emit a near-infinite flow of mana, and if he managed to endure those hundreds of years of being trapped by going into hibernation, then his mana consumption wouldn't be too great. If Eugene couldn't use prominence to its fullest, then he could still try a head-on challenge by releasing his full firepower. Still, Eugene felt that under the current conditions, a head-on confrontation should be avoided if at all possible. If he could overcome any unavoidable attacks with Geddon's shield, then he could use other weapons such as the Moonlight Sword too. A voice interrupted his thoughts. Sir Eugene? While he was in the middle of his contemplation, Eugene had arrived at the Lionheart estate. Eugene raised his head in response to the startled cry that came from in front of him. The Knights of the White Lion who were standing guard at the front gate, approached him with surprised expressions. "Are you back from your journey to find yourself?" one of the knights inquired. Another added, "If you had sent us a message in advance, we could have opened the warp gate within the estate for you. No, more importantly, why have you arrived on foot, without riding a carriage or even a horse?" After safely leaving Pandemonium, their group had arrived at the capital of Kiel. Leaving Rhaenyra in Christina's care for a short while, Eugene had headed to the Lionheart's estate on foot. This was because Eugene could travel much faster on foot than if riding in a carriage. While it might be more efficient, traveling like this still lacked in noble dignity. Of course, Eugene really didn't care about something like that. So he casually came up with the excuse, "I needed some time to think." He thought it was just a simple answer, but the knight's expressions grew strange for some reason. "Is that so?" they slowly replied. Was this a sign of delayed puberty? Or perhaps Eugene really did take after Carmen Lionheart. After recalling Eugene's nicknames of the Lightning Flash and the Blood Lion, the knights felt even more convinced of their suspicions. "You can't imagine how fervently the Patriarch and the Lady of the House searched for you, Sir Eugene," the knights said, changing the subject. "It's a blessing that you have returned safely." Eugene tilted his head in curiosity at these words. "The two of them were looking for me? Didn't they read the letter I left behind for them?" Eugene inquired. The knights hesitated. They did. However, a guest came looking for you a few days ago, Sir Eugene." "A guest?" Eugene repeated. Another guest had come looking for him? When he tried to think of who it might be, no one immediately came to mind. Eugene decided to ask straightforwardly, "Who on earth came looking for me?" "He says that he is the next chieftain of the Zoran tribe from the Samar rainforest," the knights replied. "He gave his name as Ivatar Jahav. He came looking for us 4 days ago on his own, saying that Sir Eugene had left him an invitation." Eugene remembered who this was. 2 years ago, when he brought the elves back with him from the Samar rainforest, he had received protection from the warriors of the Zoran tribe, who were led by Ivatar. "I don't want any material compensation from you. Just someday, if I ever come looking for you at the Lionheart estate, I want you to welcome me as your guest. I can at least do that much." After they parted ways with that, they hadn't exchanged any contact over the past 2 years. "I told him to at least send me a letter before he came over," Eugene grumbled. The knights informed him, "Several letters did come for you, Sir Eugene, before Ivatar Jahav himself arrived here. Seeing how he came looking for me right away without even waiting for a reply, there must be something urgent," Eugene muttered as he furrowed his brow. What could it be? He silently asked himself. It didn't seem like a simple coincidence that Ivatar would come looking for him just as he was preparing to leave for the Samar rainforest. Chapter 276. Ivatar Jahav, 2. "Where have you been?" Gerhard, who had rushed out to meet his returning son, unconsciously swallowed the remaining words he was about to say. He belatedly remembered that the family had held a discussion and decided that they would just accept Eugene's excuse for leaving without asking for any details once Eugene returned. Eventually, Gerhard just said, "That's a good expression on you." "Huh?" Eugene cocked an eyebrow. "Eugene," Gerhard said seriously, "as your father, I am weaker than you and am a man of little importance. The only special thing I have done with my life is have you as my son." Eugene asked in confusion, "What are you trying to say?" "When I first heard that you had run away, I was extremely worried, but as your father, I trust you, my son. To think you were going in order to find yourself. You might have already had your coming-of-age ceremony, but it seems you've finally become a true adult," Gerhard said proudly. Although he hadn't planned on saying these words, once he was finally done speaking, Gerhard's heart felt like it was aching with pride. Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked into his son's face, who was now a full-grown man. Glomp. Eugene had an embarrassed expression, but he didn't attempt to avoid his father's sudden embrace. Clap, clap, clap. Layman and Nina, who had been standing behind Gerhard, started clapping as they were carried away by the atmosphere. During this brief return to the mansion, Eugene was most concerned about running into Carmen Lionheart, but fortunately, it seemed that Carmen was currently away. Although no one knew for sure if she had been stimulated by the letter that Eugene left behind, Carmen had left the mansion with her apprentice, Seal, and her squire, Desra, to accompany her knights on a trip. That's fortunate, Eugene thought with some relief. He might have left the letter behind, trusting that Carmen would believe his excuse, But Eugene had no desire to have a long conversation with Carmen about his journey and the new self that he had supposedly found. In my opinion, Sir Eugene, you are extremely similar to Sir Carmen. You are reluctant to associate with Sir Carmen because you feel a strong sense of kinship with her. However, you strongly resist admitting this fact, so instead, you display such a classic case of self-hatred. Mare contributed with her totally unrequired psychoanalysis. Are you fucking crazy? Eugene cursed. It is said that two negatives make a positive, Mare responded sagely. The fact that you are actually flinging curses at me and getting angry just means that my words have hit the point, Sir Eugene. Eugene growled, what do you know? Sir Eugene, I know that you actually give a lot of effort to try and think up cool names for your techniques. I also know that whenever you create a new technique, you have to think long and hard about whether or not to name it. Although you actually really like the technique names that you've put a lot of thought into, I know that you don't dare to say them out loud because you fear being mocked by everyone else. As Mare continued to speak, Eugene's eyebrows began to tremble in rage. However, sometimes you unconsciously say your technique names out loud, Sir Eugene. Whenever that happens, you act surprised, but you still take the time to examine the reactions to the name from your surroundings. You might dislike Sir Carmen because you think she doesn't act her age, but you still feel good whenever you hear Sir Carmen praise your techniques for being cool. Eugene weakly stuttered, shut up. I have a very good understanding of you, Sir Eugene. That means only I understand the dilemmas you are going through, Mare said with a shrug of her shoulders and a triumphant smile. Although this sight made Eugene's fists tremble in anger, he still held himself back from conking Mare on the head. Your fists are trembling, Sir Eugene. Since you can't properly refute my words, are you considering suppressing me with an unreasonable act of violence? Mare accused with a pout. Why was he even trying to hold himself back? Eugene quickly changed his mind and bonked Mare on the head. Ow ow. See what I mean? This violence is just proof that my words are accurate. Mare yelped. Without saying anything more, Eugene just started walking away. Ivatar, who had been informed of Eugene's return, was already waiting for him in the parlor, but Eugene didn't head to the parlor right away. Since he had returned a month after an abrupt disappearance, Eugene felt it was only right for him to first greet Patriarch Gilead. That's a good expression on you. Could they have arranged to say the same thing in advance? Gilead said the exact same thing as Gerhard and patted Eugene on the shoulder. Did you return all by yourself? Yes, Eugene replied. What about Bishop Christina? She had something to attend to, so we parted company for a brief time. Ancilla stared at Eugene with a half-suspicious and half-wary look in her eyes. Since Eugene had brought someone back home with him every time he left the estate and returned, it seemed that Ancilla thought that it was strange he had come back alone this time. Have you heard the reason why Ivatar Jahov has come looking for me? Eugene asked. We've asked him, but he hasn't given us the answer, Gilead replied. He said that it's something that he needs to discuss with you, not the Lionheart clan. Gilead's expression was suspicious, but Eugene wasn't surprised by Ivatar's words. In the first place, when he was leaving the Samar rainforest, Ivatar had shown a great interest in Eugene personally, not the Lionheart clan. There's no way that he would have come this far just to have a chat. Could it be that he needs to ask a favor of me personally? Eugene thought to himself. He had received some help from Ivatar when he had left Samar. It might have been a different story if it were just Eugene and Christina on their own. But when they were trying to safely escape from the depths of the rainforest with more than 100 elves in tow, if Ivatar and the Zoran tribe hadn't volunteered to serve as their escorts, it would have been a pain in the ass in many ways. Eugene arrived at the parlor room of the main house. When Eugene opened the door and stepped in, Ivatar Jahov, heir to the Zoran tribe, stood up to greet him, Eugene Lionheart. As Ivatar stood, Eugene's head and gaze kept climbing upwards to follow him. Huh? Eugene breathed out in surprise. Eugene wasn't a short man either, but Ivatar's physique was beyond all normal standards. He was even taller than the bulked-up beast king Amon-Ror. He seems similar to Molan. Since he's a king, that bastard Molan must have had several concubines as well, Eugene viciously concluded. Molan's bloodline might have somehow spread to Samar and served as the root of the Zoran tribe. Eugene seriously considered the possibility of this happening as he eyed the giant Ivatar. Even so, there was a crucial difference between Ivatar and Molan. It seemed that Ivatar still cared about things like common sense and manners. He was dressed in the neat formal clothes worn by nobles from the cities, not the dress of his tribespeople, but his body was so hulkingly muscular that Eugene felt a strong sense of incongruity when seeing him in these formal clothes. It's been 2 years. I've heard the news about you even in the rainforest, Ivatar politely began. Have the rumors really spread so far? Eugene asked. The Zoran is not a closed tribe, Ivatar explained. Instead, we actively accept and exchange contact with the outside world. Ivatar's face had the color of burnt copper, but white teeth glistened from between his curved lips as he smiled. I sent a letter in advance, but even though I waited for a while, a reply didn't come. I know this isn't too polite, but I have my own circumstances, so I couldn't afford to wait any longer for a reply. My apologies. The heir to a great tribe easily bowed his head and apologized. Seeing this display of common sense and manners, Eugene was forced to reconsider his earlier conclusions about Ivatar's lineage. It seems like he really isn't from Molin's bloodline. Eugene shook his head slowly as he took a seat on the sofa. Since I was away from the mansion, it couldn't be helped. There's no need to apologize. Thank you for saying that, Ivatar said with another broad smile as he sat across from Eugene. Eugene got to the point. So, why on earth are you looking for me? I did say that I would welcome you as a guest if you ever came to visit. But there should be another reason for you to come looking for me after 2 whole years, right? There's no way that you would come here just because you wanted to be treated as a guest. If it were possible, I really wish that could be the reason why I had come here. On my part, I wanted to slowly build up a friendship between us so that we could develop a long-term amicable relationship. Ivatar wiped away his smile and stared at Eugene seriously as he continued. Allow me to say this in advance. Strictly speaking, what I'm going to tell you from now on doesn't have anything to do with my request. Eugene nodded. As I thought, you really have come looking for me since you have a request to make of me. That's true, but I have no intention of forcefully making you accept my request, Ivatar assured him. There's no problem if you reject my request after you've finished listening to the whole story. 2 years ago I did give you some little help, but the weight of that incident and what I have to talk to you about now are very different. Seeing how Ivatar would go so far as to say all that, it didn't seem like this was some trivial matter. Without saying anything, Eugene just casually raised one hand and gestured at Ivatar to continue his story. Ivatar acquiesced to the request. Among the many tribes of the rainforest, there is one tribe known for having the greatest numbers and being the most ferocious of all tribes. That tribe is the Coachella tribe. Eugene was also familiar with that name. Just like Ivatar had said, the Coachillas were the largest tribe in all of the rainforest. At the same time, theirs was a tribe that received various forms of support from Helmuth. The Coachillas were settled in the deepest depths of the rainforest, and they held complete dominion over the surrounding tribes. They were also an extremely insular tribe. They didn't interact with any tribes other than those that they controlled. Recently, the Coachella tribe's movements have been strange. They invaded and conquered 5 other tribes in just a few months. The Coachillas have conquered other tribes several times before now, but this time they're strangely determined. But that's not all. Ivatar's voice lowered as he continued. The souls of the slain warriors are being stolen. None of their souls have returned to the earth. Eugene gave a startled cry. What? My father, the chief of the Zoran tribe, decided that he could not stay idle while the Coachella tribe was behaving so strangely. And the Zoran tribe wasn't the only tribe to think that way. Several tribes have rallied alongside the Zoran tribe, and we have already confronted Coachella tribe's forces, Ivatar reported. Samar and its people had their own culture and beliefs. Starting from the distant past, their religion had been influenced by the elves and the world tree. The tribe's people believed that spirits or souls dwelled within everything and that when a person died, their spirit returned to the land and then went through a cycle of reincarnation. Originating from such a culture and faith came Samar's unique style of magic, shamanism. Eugene had also gotten a chance to take a look at it 2 years ago. The warriors of Samar were able to receive the help of the spirits even though they weren't spirit summoners, and some could even use the souls of monsters or deceased warriors to strengthen themselves. Ivatar continued his tale. In our first clash with the Coachillas, we neither won nor lost. No one was able to advance, so we stood at a stalemate. It was then that they had noticed the abnormality. Traditionally, a warrior's burial would be performed by the tribal shaman after a battle. But all the corpses were the same, Ivatar said gravely. Whether they were strong or weak, none of the warriors had their souls connected to their corpses. Couldn't they have just entered the cycle of reincarnation? Eugene cautiously proposed after a moment. Ivatar shook his head. Even after the Zoran tribe's shaman turned to necromancy, he wasn't able to summon back any of their souls. Instead, the soul of the shaman who was doing the summoning was almost stolen away. Eugene was also a wizard. At first he hadn't been listening too closely, but as Ivatar continued his story, Eugene's expression grew increasingly serious. This was brought to us by a spy who managed to infiltrate the Kochilla tribe's territory, Ivatar said as he pulled out a torn piece of paper from a pocket. Instead of a picture engraved through a spell, someone had personally drawn what they had seen onto this piece of paper. Upon being handed the paper, Eugene's expression twisted into a scowl. Someone had drawn what looked like a tower made out of human bones. Ivatar revealed a disturbing fact. Even amongst the tribes of Salmar, the Kochillas are unique in being cannibals. They prefer to prey on the slaves raised within the tribe, and they also receive sacrifices from the subordinate tribes under their control. Then whenever they hold a tribal event, many innocent people are sacrificed to the god of their tribe. Their god. Eugene repeated. The god of the land. Most of the tribes in Samar regard the god of the land as their patron deity. However, the form that their faith takes is often different. For example, the Zorans don't do human sacrifice, while the Kochillas do. Perhaps disturbed by something, Ivatar's expression twisted as he continued. However, I can't help but think that constructing a tower of human bones is going too far. In the past as well, we've always kept an eye on the Kochilla tribe's territory, but it's only recently that they've managed to build a human bone tower of such size. And it's not the only one. The spy said that new human bone towers are continuously being built within the Kochilla tribe's domain, requiring a constant offering of prisoners as sacrifices. Eugene nodded slightly and got up from his seat. Then he threw the window in the wall next to them wide open, calling out, "Lady Melkith?" In the garden below stood Melkith El-Haya, who immediately protested, "I wasn't eavesdropping. This big sis isn't such a rude person." Eugene glared down at Melkith with narrowed eyes, only for Melkith to raise her arms wide open with a truly aggrieved expression. "I'm telling the truth, you know?" Melkith insisted. "Honestly, I was curious, so I did want to eavesdrop, but no matter what, actually doing so would be far too rude. As such, I refused to eavesdrop. So all I've done is just stand here." It wasn't surprising to find Melkith, the White Tower Master, at the Lionheart estate. Through a constant flow of presents and other such exchanges with Ancilla, she had risen from the status of a guest to Ancilla's friend. But was that really all there was to it? Melkith had also taken advantage of Ancilla's weak point, the pity that Ancilla felt in her heart for the forest elves. After recommending that she personally teach the elves how to use spirit magic, thus increasing both the elves' ability to stand on their own and the Lionheart's combat strength. In the end, Melkith had even gotten permission to freely make use of the warp gate within the forest. Inside Eugene's cloak, WYD vibrated. She truly is a vicious woman. To deceive the lady of the house and even take advantage of the elves' circumstances for her own ambitions and greed. Tempest raised his voice out of dislike for Melkith. One day that vicious and disgraceful spirit summoner will pay the price for her sins. "Why do you dislike Melkith so much?" Eugene silently asked. "Hamel, why are you asking such an obvious question? Even though that woman has already made a contract with the Spirit King, she still insists on believing in unfounded superstition. It's quite ironic. To think that a believer in such folk tales is the best spirit summoner of this era. Right now, her shamefulness may not be widely known to the world, but someday, everyone in this world might find out about Melkith El-Haya's ugly side," Tempest said, clicking his tongue. "Her ugly side." Eugene scanned Melkith's attire with narrowed eyes. Melkith was wearing leather boots that came up to her knees and a bright red jacket. However, for some reason, perhaps because he had just come back from seeing more Giabella, Eugene still felt that a strong eccentricity like Melkith's was still within the acceptable range. "So why were you standing there?" Eugene eventually asked. "What do you mean by why?" Melkith scoffed. "I just wanted to hear the story about you leaving to find yourself, and I was also curious about the story behind this tribesman who came all the way from far-off Samar to meet you." Doesn't this just give you the feeling that something exciting is going to happen?" Just letting you know, this big sis has been very free lately, so I've been getting the urge to get out of the daily rut. Eugene sighed and interrupted. What are you trying to say? In any case, that's why I'm standing here. I definitely wasn't going to eavesdrop, but by standing here, won't you come over to talk to me anyway? Malkuth laughed as she winked in an exaggerated manner. Then it worked out exactly as I thought it would. Enough. Just get up here. Eugene gave in reluctantly. Do you need help from your big sis? Malkuth said teasingly. Now, you can't have forgotten, can you? This big sis is the tower master of Aratha's White Tower. You usually can't even buy a single word from me, no matter how much money you're willing to pay. Then just stay there, Eugene huffed. Malkuth instantly backtracked. However, Eugene, you and I don't just have an ordinary relationship now, do we? If you need my help, I can go anywhere you need me to. So, of course, I can climb up a few floors. In a single leap, Malkuth hopped over the windowsill. Clicking his tongue in exasperation, Eugene closed the window. Oh my. I did take a glance at him in passing yesterday, but he really is huge. I'd believe it if you said he was a cross between a human and an ogre, Malkuth commented. Eugene complained, you're being quite rude. It's just because you're from a different cultural background. In Arath, this sort of thing is said very casually. Such a joke can even be said between people who aren't all that close to each other. Could it be that you really haven't heard jokes like this in Kiel or Samar? Malkuth asked as she sat across from Ivatar with a smirk. Far from being angry, Ivatar chuckled and introduced himself. From the Zoran tribe, my name is Ivatar Jahav. Could it be that he hadn't learned how to use honorifics when learning the common language? Or perhaps he was trying to play to Malkuth's sympathies by appearing unrefined? Sitting down a little further away from Malkuth, Eugene explained the conversation that he had been having with Ivatar so far. Just as expected, Malkuth nodded with a bright smile after hearing the whole story. Do you know? For spirit summoners, the Samar rainforest is treated as a holy site. As you may already know, the land there is full of spirits. Do you know what's one of the most common subjects discussed amongst Aratha's schools of magic? What is the origin of magic? Although it's accepted that the ancient magic that was used in the mythical age when the gods still existed was modernized to become the magic of today, among all those various different types of ancient magic, the origins of spirit summoning are said to be rooted in the animism that was practiced by Samar's primitive religions. Eugene cut her short. Can't you just get to the point? Malkuth acquiesced. This means the shamanism used by Samar is a kind of primitive spirit summoning. Though whether or not human souls can be regarded as just another kind of spirit isn't a debate that I'd really like to get into. To consider humans as a type of spirit, isn't that just an insult to all spirits? Spirits aren't filthy like humans can be. So what does that mean? Eugene pressed. Well, regardless of my opinion on that matter, Samar's shamanism, particularly its necromantic side, is a type of magic with its own strong foundation of beliefs. I still think that shamanism is, in the end, just another type of magic, not black magic. After all, when it comes down to it, necromancy is simply tying another person's soul to someone else's body for some time, right? While necromancy might be one of the more advanced arts within shamanism's array of abilities, what I was talking about just now has many differences when it comes to how the necromancy of black magic deals with souls. The corners of Malkuth's mouth rose slightly. I'm aware that there are many types of spells within Samar's shamanism that make use of souls and spirits as catalysts or sacrifices. However, when it comes to specializing in the control of souls, shamanism isn't the best type of magic for it. Eugene, you know what that means, right? I've got a good guess, but I can't be certain. After all, I still don't know much about shamanism, Eugene admitted. Malkuth chuckled. Foo-foo, if that's the case, then allow this big sis to be confident for you. Human bone towers? Mass human sacrifices? While I would like to dismiss those as just being part of their barbaric culture, if the souls of those who died during the battle are being stolen, then what other kind of magic could be responsible for it other than black magic? Ivatar made no response. He quietly folded his arms as he listened to Malkuth speak, while Eugene also kept his mouth shut, even as his expression twisted into a scowl. Although I'm not sure what they're planning to do with so many souls, I can be sure of one thing, Malkuth stated confidently. Any black magic that requires so many souls to be used as a sacrifice must be some terrible act of heresy. This might not have been the case during the war 300 years ago, But that kind of black magic is not tolerated among the black magic of today. In the first place, following that era of war, it has been strictly forbidden for any human practitioners to use the human soul when practicing black magic. Eugene frowned. So you're saying that Helmuth is behind all of this? I heard that the Demon King of Incarceration came to the night march in person? I've already heard the story myself, but don't you think that what the Demon King of Incarceration said was terribly ambiguous? The Demon King of Incarceration specifically said that he wouldn't be the one to end this piece first. Melkith giggled and crossed her legs. I don't think there's any reason for the Demon King to show up in person just to lie. Because, as something like him, every word he says is reinforced by the weight of his own existence. In that case, doesn't that mean the black magic that is about to be cast in Samar won't threaten the peace of the current era? After all, the Demon King himself doesn't seem to be intervening in it. Are you trying to say that this is all just some trivial matter that will only play out within the bounds of the Samar rainforest? Eugene said doubtfully. I'm not sure what exactly is going to happen, but shouldn't that be the case? Melkith hummed thoughtfully. From the perspective of the Demon Kings of Helmuth, it might just be a small affair happening in some forest out in the country. At these words, Ivatar's clenched fists let out a cracking sound. Well, I think there's no doubt that someone in the Coachella tribe is preparing to cast some black magic on a huge scale, Melkith conceded. Eugene, have you heard about that? Heard about what? Eugene replied. Melkith turned to Eugene with a smile. Balzac Ludbeth has disappeared from Aroth. 1. The word that Tempest actually uses here is the Korean word for fake, as in a believer of fake facts or religions. Chapter 277. Ivatar Jahav 3. Aroth's Black Tower Master Balzac Ludbeth. This name brought forth a memory of black-rimmed glasses, short hair with a neat parting, a thin face and sharp eyes. After having met him so many times, Eugene could easily recall Balzac Ludbeth's face. Although they had exchanged several conversations, Eugene still didn't have a clear understanding of what kind of a person Balzac was. Eugene himself knew the reason for this. 300 years had indeed passed since Hamel died. While it was only natural for the world to have changed, it still seemed like there had been far too many changes. However, Eugene was still the same Hamel as ever. However, from the moment he was born, he had known that he was Hamel, and even though he had lived up until now as Eugene, he couldn't completely shake off the remnants of the time when he had lived as Hamel. Even though the Helmuth he had personally visited had become quite comfortable, a very comfortable empire for humans to live in. For Eugene, Helmuth was still and always would be that same hellish devildom. Likewise, the Demon King of Incarceration might currently be viewed as a sage who enacted wise policies for the benefit of the continent and all humans. But to Eugene, the Demon King of Incarceration was still that same terrible Demon King who swatted humans like insects. And the same went for the demon folk. Then there were the Black Wizards. In this current era, black magic had been recognized as just another school of magic, and black wizards were now a respected class of wizards. However, to Eugene, black wizards were still just the pawns of the Demon King and his demon folk, traitorous bastards who had betrayed their fellow human beings. The times really had changed completely. Eugene had also tried to compromise to some extent with all of these changes. However, Eugene could still only view Balzac through the tinted lenses of his identity as a black wizard. In the end, he didn't know what kind of person Balzac was because of his own prejudice against black wizards. Until now, Balzac had never once shown any ill will towards Eugene. Instead, he would always try to provide help to Eugene. Balzac would warn Eugene of any dangers and had even given Eugene advice on the creation of his signature that Balzac hadn't even offered to his own disciples. Yet even with all that, Eugene still couldn't accept that there were innocent intentions behind Balzac's assistance. There had to be a reason behind all of Balzac's actions. Having been so kind, wasn't Balzac inevitably planning some kind of betrayal? I knew that bastard would do something like this, Eugene snarled. As expected, all black wizards were sons of bitches that you couldn't show any trust. After staring at Eugene, who had immediately burst into rage, Mare clutched at her stomach and laughed. As expected from the disciple of just such a master, you also show the same extreme hatred of black wizards. Eugene scowled. From the very beginning, I was suspicious of Balzac Ludbeth. After all, he obviously kept trying to get close to me by pretending to be friendly. He kept telling me things and providing me with help. I was curious as to the reason why he did so, and now I know. What are you saying? Melkith asked. That bastard was kind to me because he wanted me to take it easy on him when I'm eventually forced to beat him up, Eugene accused. This firm response left Melkith flabbergasted. For a few moments, Melkith stared at Eugene, her eyes blinking in disbelief. Then she coughed and nodded as she said, "Ahem, well, that might be the case. However, I have to point out it's still not certain that Balzac is the ringleader behind all this." Eugene argued back, "Aren't black wizards capable of casting black magic on such a scale rare? And you've already said that Balzac is missing from Arath, right?" While it was definitely a sudden affair, he did apply for an official leave from the Black Tower of Magic, Melkith corrected while trying to ignore the stinging pangs of her conscience. Originally, the Tower Masters were the sort of personage who wouldn't lightly leave the Tower of Magic that they governed. Although it wasn't very inconvenient if they had to do so, they were still expected to give notice to the Tower of Magic and the royal court whenever they needed to go to a place outside of Arath. However, Melkith had never done so. She felt it was a pain to fill out a leave request and she was just going somewhere she wanted to go, so why even bother making a report? The same went for today as well. Melkith had just arrived at the Lionheart estate without giving any word to the White Tower of Magic or Aratha's royal court. However, compared to Melkith acting on her own whims, it still gave off a very different feeling when Balzac decided to go off on his own. During the decades since he had risen to the seat of the Black Tower Master, Balzac was someone who had never once seen fit to leave Arath. What did he put down on his leave request? Eugene inquired. Melkith took a moment to recall. I think he said that he wanted to take leave to go on a short trip. It doesn't look like he specified his destination. As Lady Melkith may well know, I've been suspicious of Balzac Ludbeth from the very beginning. He was always pretending to be a very kind person, so I couldn't prove anything even though he is a black wizard. Balzac always seemed like an out-of-place existence when compared to other black wizards. He even said that he signed a contract with the Demon King out of practical interests, Eugene revealed. Since ages past, most people who wore a friendly smile and said things that sounded nice and seemed to make sense had been scammers. Ivatar, who had been listening silently, slowly spoke up. I haven't heard much about this guy named Balzac, but I do know that among the various forms of support that Helmuth has sent to the Coachella tribe, it has included wizards and demonic beasts. The wizards of Helmuth have served in the role of shamans for the Coachella tribe and have trained the younger generation of the tribe's shamans. The demonic beasts have also provided other services to the Coachella tribe. That means there'll be other black wizards apart from Balzac, Eugene surmised. Melkith cocked an eyebrow. It seems you're absolutely convinced that Balzac is the ringleader behind all this? Eugene shook his head. Not at all. I can't be certain of anything yet. It's just that I've been suspicious of that bastard from the very start, so I can't help but think that it's very likely. In fact, Eugene was more suspicious of Amelia Merwin's involvement in all of this. Yet why would she leave the desert, a battlefield where she would possess an overwhelming advantage? With just one word from her, she could mobilize Nahama's entire army and also muster up all the wizards whose dungeons were located within her desert. Still, if at all possible, I'd prefer it if Amelia Merwin was the one behind all this, Eugene admitted to himself. If Amelia had left the desert and was up to something in the Samar rainforest, that would actually be of great benefit to Eugene. He wasn't happy with how their first meeting in the desert had turned out, and he'd been waiting for the chance to confront Amelia Merwin ever since. If they happened to run into each other in the Samar rainforest, Eugene would definitely tear Amelia limb from limb and then slit her throat. Or else, it might just be Edmund Kodrith, but there's too little information when it comes to him, Eugene thought regretfully. Edmund Kodrith was the master of Vladimir and the current staff of incarceration. It might not even be one of the three mages, but instead a completely different black wizard. For example, the black wizard or demon folk who had instigated Hector's rebellion. What Eugene knew for sure was that the Demon King of Incarceration couldn't be the instigating force behind all of this. As Melkith had said, there was no way that an existence on the level of the Demon King of Incarceration would be involved in something as petty as this. If it were the Demon King of Incarceration, there would be no need for something like a sacrifice when it came to casting black magic. If he really did require a sacrifice, then he could just start another war. So what was currently happening within the Samar rainforest was something that could be confined solely to the rainforest. Something like a struggle between the native tribes. Such struggles had always been commonplace throughout the history of the Samar rainforest, And it wasn't something for the rest of the kingdoms on the continent to get involved in. "I'll go with you," Eugene said with a nod once he finished sorting out his thoughts. "I also happen to have business in Samar." Melkith's ears pricked up. "Business? What kind of business?" "It's a secret," Eugene responded. "I want to go with you as well," Melkith whined as she clung to Eugene's arms. Her behavior held none of the dignity that the White Tower Master should have. "I am going with you," Melkith said firmly. "It sounds like it'll be fun. I'm also curious about what's going on in the rainforest, and more importantly, there's something that I just can't forgive." "What is it?" Eugene asked. Melkith passionately shouted, "The Samar rainforest is like a holy site for all spirit summoners. So how dare some black wizard carry out their evil plot within the rainforest? I, the greatest spirit summoner of this era, Melkith Alhaya, have my eyes set on them. As expected of the spirit princess of the White Tower of Magic," Eugene said sarcastically. "Kaya!" Melkith let out a shriek of fright and threw Eugene's arm away. In the face of such a chaotic sight, it was difficult for Ivatar to continue maintaining his composure. That said, he couldn't bring himself to make a disgusted expression either. Ivatar had come here without even being sure that he would be able to get any help from Eugene, but weren't things working out exceptionally well for him? To think that he wouldn't just get Eugene's help, but he would even end up receiving assistance from Melkith Alhaya. "Thank you," Ivatar said, getting up from his seat and bowing his head to Eugene. "When this is all over, I will prepare a reward that will be sure to satisfy you. And apart from that, I will also never forget your help." "What about me?" Melkith, who had been plugging her ears to try and shake off the embarrassing nickname from her childhood, raised her head. "I'm going to help you as well, you know. I will also prepare a reward for you, White Tower Master," promised Ivatar. Melkith nodded proudly, "As you should. Also, Eugene, don't you have anything to say to me?" "What?" Eugene curtly demanded. "You were supposed to bring back a souvenir for me from Lehane," Melkith said with a rarely seen straight expression. After staring at Melkith's sullen face for a few moments, Eugene slid open his cloak and pulled out a large stone. "I was going to give it to you anyway, but you sure do have an impatient personality," Eugene grumbled. This was a firestone, a stone infused with flames that could rarely be found in Lehane. That alone would be enough to make it a material with a high value, but the firestone that Eugene pulled out was the highest grade of firestone that wasn't easy to buy even if you had the money for it. "Kaya!" Melkith's eyes shot wide open as she gazed at the bright red colors of the firestone. Rubbing the firestone she had taken from Eugene's hands against her cheek, she smiled happily. "It's hot. Like as if it was just taken out of the fire." While shouting this, Melkith pulled on her collar and thrust the firestone into her cleavage. Eugene's face twisted into a scowl at this sight as Tempest shouted inside his head, "Hamel, ask that lunatic why she's doing that." Eugene complied, "Why on earth did you just do that? Do you really not know? It's to increase my sensitivity toward the catalyst, by transferring its heat to my skin and increasing my own body temperature." Such ridiculous superstitions. Unless Ifrit isn't in his right mind, there's no way he would sign a contract with someone who still believes in such folktales, Tempest exploded. While ignoring Tempest, who kept roaring in outrage inside his head, Eugene leaped up from his seat. "There's no need to leave for the rainforest immediately, right? Let's leave in a few days' time," Eugene proposed. "Yep, I need some time to prepare as well," Melkith said as she also stood up. While smiling brightly at the heat coming from between her breasts, she wrapped both arms around her chest. "Why don't you send word to Lovelian as well?" Melkith called out to Eugene just as they were leaving the parlor. "Your master hates black wizards even more than you do. He should fly over right away, especially since you're caught up in this issue as well." Eugene informed her, "I was planning to contact him even if you didn't remind me." Lovelian was also aware that Sienna was currently sealed away due to Raizakia's curse. While Eugene didn't expect him to be of much help in killing Raizakia, Lovelian should be able to provide a lot of help when it came to solving the issue in the Samar rainforest. "Well then, I'm going to go and sign a contract with Ifrit," Melkith said cheerfully. Eugene kindly reminded her, "You can't be certain you'll be able to sign a contract with him, right?" "If it's me then I can do it. For some reason I just have that feeling," Melkith said before leaping out of the window in the hallway with a confident smile. Eugene really couldn't tell why she felt the need to jump out of the window. Cyan was at the training grounds. To think that he hadn't even considered showing his face, even though his brother had just returned from a trip. Eugene thought about giving Cyan a punch out of anger, but after seeing Cyan focused on swinging his sword while sweating profusely, Eugene changed his mind. He's improved a lot. There had been a tremendous improvement in Cyan's skills since the last time Eugene had seen him. His body movements were also impeccable, and his mana control was particularly impressive. He had fully mastered everything that Eugene had taught him a few years ago. In the end, it's all thanks to my good teaching. Eugene felt a sense of pride stir within his chest. He felt like he understood why people decided to raise disciples as they grew older. Feeling a blatant gaze resting on him, Cyan halted his sword and demanded, "Why do you keep staring at me?" While taking deep breaths, Cyan spun around to face Eugene. Seeing Cyan's cocky appearance, Eugene changed his mind once more. Eugene strode over to Cyan and landed a low kick on Cyan's thigh. Cyan let out a cry, "Arg!" Eugene cursed, "You bastard, how dare you not greet your brother on his return? It's not like it's been just once or twice that you've gone and left the mansion on your own." Cyan argued, "No matter what the case might be, if you saw that I've returned, you should at least say that you're glad to see me back." Eugene lectured. Cyan felt like he was about to go crazy from frustration. After all, how could Eugene still bear to act so proud when he had left behind such an embarrassing letter about how he was going to find himself? Cyan had thought that Eugene would be too embarrassed to meet his eye, so he had acted out of consideration and just greeted Eugene like he usually would, but now. "Hand over Geddon's shield," Eugene demanded. Cyan yelped, "What?" Eugene repeated himself, "I said hand over the shield. In any case, you're not even using it currently. What the hell are you saying after returning home all of a sudden?" Cyan demanded. Bam! Eugene kicked Cyan in the thigh once more. Cyan let out a single cry as he fell before rolling around on the floor. Eugene growled, "If I say hand it over, then just hand it over." Cyan cursed at him, "You crazy bastard, you should at least give me a reason before asking me to hand it over." "I need to use it for something," Eugene explained curtly. "That's why I'm asking you. Where are you going to use it?" Cyan screamed. Eugene didn't want to make everyone worry by saying something unnecessary, so he had intended to be recklessly forward and rob the shield. However, seeing as how it wasn't just some ordinary item, Cyan's resistance was as strong as expected. In the end, Eugene gave Cyan a rough explanation of why he needed the shield. Without saying anything about Rhyzakia, Eugene said he needed it to solve a problem that had cropped up in the Samar rainforest. "Are you insane?" asked a dumbfounded Cyan. "Why would you get involved in a fight between the natives who live in that forest?" Eugene shrugged. "A black wizard is up to something and I'm the hero after all." After hearing this reply, Cyan was left speechless. Seeing Cyan's expression crumple, Eugene continued talking. "Also, it's not like it doesn't have absolutely anything to do with us." Cyan frowned. "What do you mean?" Eugene explained about the black magic that Uad had cast at the Black Lion Castle and how Hector's soul had been retrieved by someone. As he listened to the story, Cyan's face gradually stiffened. "So what you're saying is, the black wizard who Hector was contracted to might be reproducing the same black magic that you had used?" Cyan confirmed once Eugene was finished. "It's just a suspicion. Nothing is certain as of yet," warned Eugene. Eugene actually thought that this was impossible. Uad was able to do something like that because the remnants of the Demon Kings were acting together with him. "Even if it's just a speculation, that means there's still a possibility," Cyan muttered. "Hector was from a collateral bloodline of the Lionhearts, and Uad was from the main line." This was why Eugene hadn't wanted to say anything. Eugene clicked his tongue and shook his head. "That's why I said it's not like we aren't completely uninvolved. I'm going to go and check it out so you don't have to give it any more thought," Eugene assured him. "We need to report this to the Patriarch," Cyan insisted. Eugene immediately refused. "If you do that, things will become way too big, you bastard." With the Patriarch's personality, he will definitely feel a sense of responsibility and mobilize the Lionheart clan's full power. Cyan snorted. "And so what if he does? Isn't it only natural for him to do so?" "It's still uncertain and it's something that I've decided on my own," Eugene argued. "Right now, it's still just my personal problem, so I don't want to go so far as to mobilize the power of the clan." Eugene thought that adding the full power of the clan to their efforts might be a bit too much. For now, he had already arranged to get the help of 2 archwizards of the 8th Circle, and then there was Eugene himself. There was also an army of the Samar tribes led by the Zoran tribe. Since the war was something that the tribespeople would be handling in any case, Eugene was determined to target the ringleader and thoroughly destroy any chance of the black magic being successfully cast. However, if the Lionheart clan's knightly orders were sent as well, Eugene would no longer be able to do so. When dealing with black magic cast on such a wide range, the knightly orders wouldn't be able to help but suffer some damage. Eugene didn't want the Lionheart clan to shed any of their blood in this war. "Are you being considerate of the Patriarch's feelings?" Cyan, who had been silent for a few moments, suddenly spoke up. Cyan's words had hit the mark. Eugene admitted the truth. When that bastard Uad went crazy and died, the Patriarch suffered greatly. It couldn't be helped. Uad had still been Gilead's eldest son. Uad may have smeared the clan's name by conspiring to do something that a descendant of the main line should never do, and had even actually attempted to overthrow the Lionheart clan. However, no matter what Uad may have thought of his father, Gilead had loved Uad. The death of his son had caused Gilead much grief. He blamed himself for what Uad had done on the grounds that he had failed to raise his son properly. The black magic being cast in Samar might or might not have something to do with Uad. However, Eugene didn't want to force Gilead to face his own son's death once more by informing him of something that he wasn't even sure about. "I'll lend you Geddon's shield," Cyan said after letting out a long sigh. "But in return, let me go with you as well." Eugene cursed. "What did you just say, you bastard?" "I said that I'm going with you," Cyan insisted. "Since I think you might be lying, I also want to check things out and see for myself what's going on in Samar. If you're right, then you're not the only one involved in this matter." Cyan had also been in the forest of the Black Lion Castle at that time. After being ambushed by Hector, he was defeated and captured by Uad. "I am the next patriarch of the Lionheart clan. If this is an issue that the current patriarch can't step forward to deal with, then I'll check it out in his stead," Cyan declared. Eugene warned him, "It might be dangerous." Cyan snorted. "So what if it is? Do you not want to take me with you because you think I'll hold you back like last time? Do what you want, because if you don't take me with you, then I can just go and check it out by myself." Cyan was spouting nonsense without any semblance of logic, just one-sided stubbornness. Eugene felt like his own heart was being pricked. "That's right, this is how it must have felt," Eugene muttered as his expression twisted into a scowl. To think that Eugene would actually end up sympathizing with the feelings that his comrades must have felt back then, 300 years ago. He honestly didn't want to bring Cyan with him. However, he thought that Cyan's words also had some truth to them, but at the same time, Eugene also felt that he didn't want to bring Cyan to such a dangerous battlefield. But that's just my own selfish desire. Back in the snowfields, when Cyan and Seal had been ordered to retreat first after they were attacked by Noir Giabella, Anise had said this to Eugene, who was feeling sympathy for the twins who were suffering from a sense of shame. "The times do not flow as we wish. The humans that live through these times are weak and light, so they have no choice but to get carried away in this huge flow. That goes especially for those twins who are Vermouth's descendants. As long as they still bear the Lionheart name, they have no choice but to stand at the forefront of the upheaval in this era. When that time comes, will they walk into the light of fire? Or perhaps, will they eventually decide to abandon everything and run away? Hamel, that isn't something that you can decide for them. A man's destiny is something that he must decide for himself. If you really do care for your siblings, then don't treat them like children. Respect their decisions." There was no real need for Cyan to insist on following them. He could have just left it up to Eugene. However, Cyan had dared to say something like this because he felt a clear sense of responsibility. "All right, I get it," Eugene sighed, unwilling to break Cyan's spirit. Within Cyan's stubbornness and pushy attitude, Eugene saw his own appearance from 300 years ago. "That's good," Cyan said with a laugh as he started getting up. "If you weren't willing to bring me with you, I would have reported this matter to the Patriarch." "This son of a bitch," Eugene cursed and landed another low kick on Cyan's thigh just as the latter got to his feet. Hamel from 300 years ago hadn't been that petty. Or at least that's what Eugene sincerely thought.